Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about bugs. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, have you ever inherited a project full of bugs? And if so, what did you do to address those issues and stop them from coming back in the future? This is my day, dude. You've just captured the day of, I think, maybe 80% of the industry. I'm not gonna go that far, but there's a lot of us who are working with a lot of shitty systems. And they're shitty because we are unfortunately not smart enough to only work on greenfield projects, because usually that's the best. This is also where a lot of the resentment comes from product developers and consultants, because the product developers really like hating the consultants because they usually are the ones who get to work on the greenfield projects, and then the management throws that project into your lap and, hey, you own this thing right now, and from now on and forever. Thank you so much. This is going to be great. Oh, and I see that they've cut all the corners, not just a few, all the corners. This is basically a globe you're giving me now. It's not a box anymore, so that they could say that they shipped it. That's gonna be great. And it's not tested either. Thank you. And no documentation? Oh, don't worry. I didn't really expect more than maybe a comment here and there. This is exactly how it is. It's practically for everybody. So I'll give you a story that uh, that exactly the thing that I had to do to start dealing with this sort of issue, because I've had this happen more than once. Uh, but this one is fairly recent. So basically, what happened was that I started working in a new team. I had transferred into a new team because I wanted to try newer and better things and so forth, and do, as I like to say, the professional traveling, see the world, see different ways of working. And I went into this team where I noticed very quickly that the developer that had been working there had been a code monkey. And that's not a bad thing per se, because him and me, we get along really well, and or we did get along really well, and so we started collaborating together and started working. And I had noticed that a lot of fairly, let's call them pragmatic choices, because given the circumstances, these choices were very pragmatic. So most of them, quite a few of them, were bad choices, and they could have, of course, been corrected. But I understood the choices that had been made, because it's always easy to come into a project or get a project and say, just judge the code of the person who wrote it without a context. And there are many reasons as to why code looks the way it does. So I try to not judge, because I like to say, I have my own saying where I'm one of those people who I prefer working on the solution instead of arguing about the problem. So you dive in and you start looking into, okay, this is my sphere now. You try to do some inventory and figure out, okay, where are the main issues, where are the design flaws and so forth, and then you create a priority list, because you know that you can't fix everything at the same time, so you need to address the most critical stuff. And the philosophy that I follow, and I follow it I try to follow it very strictly, but as I said, you still have to have a business mindset and you still have to be pragmatic. So think of this as more of an ambition, a constant ambition that is it's like the base of everything that I try to do. And it is that your stakeholder will always want you to deliver as fast as possible, always. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that the system works. And this product was a very perfect example of that exact thing, because the product had reached the point where, as I like to say, you know that you need to start figuring out quality, and this is usually what happens for a lot of companies when the system becomes so unstable that it's no longer possible to maintain. And in some systems this happens after years, and in some systems it happens within months, because the fundamental problem that you're solving or the design of the system is so shitty uh, that you that it's inevitable that it happens, and it did happen for us. So I had a sit down with my coworker, and here is the key thing, which is to his credit, he was open to acknowledging that there was an issue, that we needed to start thinking in terms of quality, because he had been thinking the same way. It's just that he didn't have the personal strength to fight his stakeholders on this. And I said, don't worry, I can take this fight, because I am more than capable of talking to a few people and trying to and making them understand that the issues that they are complaining about, because at the point they were at that moment, they were seeing some issues, but they were still it was a thorn in their side that things weren't working. And I can spoil the ending and say that by the time we started getting to a point where we were almost ready to start applying some of the quality checks, they were complaining like rigorously. They were really upset, and I like this, because this is education for stakeholders. Nothing educates a stakeholder as quickly as to how important testing and quality and assurance and so forth is, as a really shitty system, where a very unstable system that they don't trust, but at the same time they need to sell that to a customer, and the customers are complaining all the time. The more the customer complains, the more the pressure goes up, and the more pressure they get, the more pressure they want to latch on to you. And this is where you, as a software developer, you need to be strong. You have to realize that this is not completely on you, because you need to follow certain practices. You need certain amounts of time and resources to do things well. If you don't get that time, if you try to suggest it and you try to push it and say that we really need to do this stuff, and you get overridden by your stakeholder, then this fucking thing is on them. And this is exactly what happened. So what we did was that we said, okay, let's start first and foremost by working with adding code coverage. That's number one, because at that moment we simply didn't know, like, everything was untested. We didn't know how horrible the situation was. So we need insight. We need to understand what's going on. So we added code coverage and set the threshold, saying that, all right, we're going to cover this amount, and started working on that. So every single delivery we had a CI pipeline that actually checked the coverage. Now, coverage in of itself is not a good way to get quality testing, but it is a way for you to make sure that you get the habit in. And then we started communicating and collaborating and making sure that we actually were doing proper testing and code reviews and things of that nature. That was the first and simple thing. Then after that, we started building we were trying to work up a trust between us by working together, because our collaboration was the next part that we started working on. By collaborating together and asking the right questions of our stakeholders, and making sure that we don't get into this mindset that had been the trend before, where the engineer that had been doing this, he just said yes to literally everything, whatever it was. He was just, yeah, I don't want to take that discussion, I don't want to suggest different alternatives and like options and so forth. I'm just going to do whatever they say. And that is, as I told them, you can't do that, because that's like a doctor who doesn't tell the patients that they're getting cancer or diabetes. You're supposed to be better than that. You have to be better than that. So we started coaching, and that improved the situation a little bit further. And the last thing we did was to start going from having all this domain knowledge in this person, because he basically knew everything about the system, and the PO knew the rest of like all the specifications. And so we started documenting all of our manual processes, and we started writing down things that were very domain specific to him, and knowledge share, so that I understood it as well. And that then meant that we could grow the team even further. And then finally we started taking all, we started creating checklists for all the things that were needed to be checked as part of every delivery. Every time we were to deliver something, we knew that, all right, we need to make sure that this works, this works, this works, this works. And we did this as a manual process because we didn't have the time to automate the thing. But the first thing was to create a checklist, because that checklist was then converted into BDD tests and end-to-end tests that actually checked the whole system. So that it became a two-parter. While we were doing all of this other stuff and finishing up the most critical issues and tying up those loose ends, we were making sure that we documented all the things we had to do manually, and we actually started moving even faster. Like, we very quickly we got to a point where all of these issues kind of started falling away, and the vast majority of those benefits came because we were able to get the resources and the time and get the buy-in into making these sorts of changes. And that's one part. If one part of it was because the stakeholders had felt the pain. They really understood how, like, we need to do this, otherwise we can't help you. Like, then you have to stand there and have your customer yell at you. And that thing, together with the credibility that I added into the mix by by communicating and talking things through with the stakeholders and having those soft skills, made us get to the buy-in, and then we could fix all the things. So what I want you to take away from this is that having buggy and shitty code is like the norm. It's the normal for practically every single software developer. The way that I have fixed it in the past is to understand this fundamental truth. Your customer will always want you to move at maximum speed, but if you never ever prioritize quality, the thing is going to break. And at the end of the day, nothing is more important than the stability of the system. People expect shit to work. So you have to decide what maximum speed actually is. Because if you just fold and you just do whatever the customer is saying all the time, you're going to be able to move really, really quickly, but not for that long, until you're going to get really angry customers who say, well, nothing's working. You have to be the doctor. You have to be the person who says, you know what, this maximum velocity that we can achieve is this, because we have all this other quality stuff that we have to do in order to guarantee that we can continue at a steady pace for as long as possible. Have a great day.